For today's story, we are talking about someone who has an autistic son who has problems keeping a mask on, has to be able to travel to get to a hospital for treatment, and can't fly on an airline because they can't keep a mask on. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you'll enjoy this legal educational content, and today may be the day I earn your subscription. For today's story, we are talking about airlines and masks. As we have discussed on this channel before, federal law governs the flying of planes because they fly across state lines, right? So how we deal with the airplanes, well, that, is federal law for a large part. So federal law says you have to wear a mask on an airplane. Okay. But then, of course, there are some problems. How about people who can't wear masks on airplanes? How about them? And we have such a situation, at least arguably, in play, where we have a person who's 4 years old, who has issues with autism, and because of this, has trouble keeping the mask on their face. And as a response to this, has been kicked off flights and not allowed to board flights, which is a real problem for this child because they can't fly to get to the medical care they need because of the specialized medical care they need to get to the hospitals that can treat them. So we have tension of whole kinds of things. So we're going to read this article and learn a little bit about what's going on. The father of a 4-year-old autistic boy said that his son was banned from Frontier Airlines for life because he cannot bear a mask. Now, first of all, the fact that we're banning a 4-year-old for life is kind of like, he's 4 years old and we're banning him for life at 4. There's something that's just wrong about that, on the first blush. He's not an adult. So he's not even close to an adult. He's 4. So this kid receives medical treatment in Boston and has been blocked from getting on these flights twice because he doesn't wear his mask. His father is suing the TSA and 2 airlines over their policy. He says his son is medically exempted from wearing a mask, and he has presented doctor's notes to the airline workers. The father says he's been banned for life from Frontier Airlines. I was specifically banned as well. Incredible. Explained that he's seeking a Supreme Court intervention in this case. He's trying to. I don't give him high hopes of that because of the odds of it normally, but He also slammed the appalling and condescending treatment from airline workers when he explained the situation and provided the note. It's just totally mind-blowing to be refused travel for that medical care. This is sick. This is child abuse, Ingraham responded, saying that companies are running scared from liability. Well, that's fair enough because they have a mandate that's been imposed on them from federal law. So their attorneys obviously are going to be cautious about it because, they want to be compliant with the federal law. The boy's parents say that his son cannot tolerate the mask on flight. And he said that the doctor's note do not override corporate policy. So corporate policy might have a different mechanism than just simply submitting a doctor's note. There might be a formalized mechanism to go through. And that formalized mechanism may or may not comply with federal law. Merely showing up with a doctor's note may not be sufficient. So if their corporate policy is, if you just show up with a doctor's note, we're going to refuse you, that may not be in compliant with federal law, including the Americans with Disabilities Act. Americans with Disability Act, of course, only requires you to give reasonable accommodation. And that doesn't necessarily mean that just because I show up with a note that day, which incidentally, they have no particular method of validating on the fly, that might not be sufficient. So, they might have a policy otherwise, which might be fully compatible. And so there are problems here in terms of getting these masks and making sure that they're compliant and things like that, and the process in hand. So that brings us to the end of the discussion about this father who's having problems with his autistic son. I can't speak to the degree of autism, and I can't speak to the degree to which he has gone through any formalized process that's been made available by the airline or otherwise, or how effective those processes are. But I have no problem in believing that merely showing up with a doctor's note is not going to cut it. Because, how would you know it's from a doctor? How would you know it's authentic? and all the rest of it. How would you be able to validate that? I'm sure there's some sort of more formalized process if you're going to get some sort of exemption. And how good that process is or otherwise, I don't know. But I would imagine it requires a little bit more. So I don't have particularly high hopes for his ability to get Supreme Court review, not for least the reasons that it's not immediately clear that he's followed whatever process is in place. But at least from the moment, that brings end discussion of this story. Thank you so much for being part of the Uncivil Law family. If you enjoyed this legal education content, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. We appreciate your continuing support. And until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.